I'd love to kick it off with a question which I think is really good. I'd love to, like, because your mission is so apparent, like it's so palpable. Can you just articulate what your mission is?
Oh, wow.
There's a tough one. Well, I think it's easy when I...
Oh, there's so many layers to our mission. But what we're wanting to do is restore the cycle awareness to the world, but particularly menstrual cycle awareness. So we would love every woman, every person on the planet who has a menstrual cycle to be able to know about and relish this life-sustaining, inspiring, nourishing resource that's held within their being, that is the menstrual cycle. And that as they tap into the menstrual cycle, they get to feel all the possibilities of it on a physical level, how it supports our well-being, but also how it supports our creative life, and ultimately how it opens us to a spiritual consciousness. And then the next really important thing for me is that it reminds us, or it embeds us in our connection to nature. That is sort of at the heart of it. It's restoring us to connection to ourselves and connection to nature.
Beautiful. Love it. I love the sound of that. Well, what does menstrual cycle awareness mean? Because like we live in an age now when it's often seen as something that gets in the way of our busy, productive lives. At least I'm speaking as a man, but often I can see how my mother and how my wife relates to her menstruation when it comes. It's something that gets in the way as opposed to something to be celebrated, something that's sacred, something that's important, something that is distinctively feminine, if you will. And I wonder if you could speak to that, because it's...
Yeah, so this is really very much at the heart of our mission, is taking something that's so very everyday, biological, functional, that we live with, that affects us on such a profound level, and bringing a whole new level of attention and care to it. So we coined this phrase, menstrual cycle awareness, when we wrote our first book, Wild Power, because we realized that it goes actually beyond just paying attention to ourselves and our cycle. It is actually, we think of it as being a spiritual practice. We sometimes talk about it as an inner yoga, because our menstrual cycle is moving us through these different stages and phases, through these different moods and energies, and being aware of that and beginning to cooperate with that and trust that as being like an innate, healthy rhythm, suddenly just changes the whole way that we live. It brings us into an entirely different kind of lifestyle, into a different rhythm, into a different way of being, and does what Alexandra started off by saying. It restores cyclicity to the world. So, I mean, as you both know, we live in a world that has really lost connection with nature and really lost a sense of relating to the cycles of nature, the cycles of life, the cycles of our body and being. And when we practice menstrual cycle awareness, we actually start to live in this cyclical way. So in other words, we're recovering this aspect of our humanity, which is so innate in us and so central to our health and happiness and well-being. And it's such a simple thing to do. You know, it's not like another thing you've got to go out. You don't have to go out and do yoga. You don't have to go and meditate. You just need to live in accordance with your cycle. So it's actually kind of radical, we think.
And yet so simple. Like it's been so innate for, since the dawn of woman and man, really. It's been innate. But then it seems like over the last 100 years, maybe 150 years since the Industrial Revolution, it's probably, we've started to view it quite differently. Menstruation, that as Stephen articulated, that it's often viewed as a problem, or I need to go in the pill because my periods are painful. And, that there's very much this, it isn't this mental, like how you're reframing it is beautiful, that it's really reframing it as there's so much information within it and so much opportunity to connect with yourself and become more self-aware, that it is the ultimate spiritual journey. Am I right in understanding it like that? We just finished our longest run ever there. A couple of weeks ago, we ran the Wicklow Way, which was 130 kilometers, which we did over 2 days. We ran the Wicklow Way. And we did it in our Vivo barefoot shoes, which people go, wow, you did it in barefoot shoes. And we did, and we had no pain in the soles of our feet at all. And what we found was incredible is that because of the minimal soles, we really felt connected to the landscape, because there was so many different landscapes, hills and mountains and rugged terrains and over rivers and brooks and valleys, and just to interact and really, because you got the same amount of nerve endings in the soles of your feet. And we've exclusively been wearing Vivo barefoot shoes for the last decade. As soon as we started wearing them, you know, they really did change our paradigm for what a shoe should be. They have a natural wide toe box, which really encourages your feet to build strength. Studies from the University of Liverpool found that your foot strength improves by up to 60% within only a matter of months, which is absolutely incredible.
And I think one thing to note is that you wouldn't buy clothes that don't fit you or make you hunch over, just make you take on an unnatural shape. However, many of us buy footwear that forces our feet into these kind of tight, restricted positions where they're kind of just like a cast. They're locked in. By wearing Vivo barefoot shoes, they've got a wide toe box, which allows you to spread and allow your feet to be in a natural shape, and also to get feedback from the terrain. We couldn't recommend them more. Use the code HP20 to get 20% off at checkout. That's HP20 at checkout, vivobarefoot.com.
And my final thing is then that your feet are the foundation of your movement. That, you know, it really all starts with your feet. If your feet are healthy and strong, that directly impacts your ankles, your knees, your hips, your spine. So we found them just to be fantastic for our body, and for particularly as we get older, as all of us get older year by year. They're great.
One thing I've often longed for is a machine or something that I can make my own oat milk or plant-based
modern day milk maker.
A modern day cow.
Modern day cow. And it just so happens that Nama have released a Nama M1, which is their milk maker. And the amazing thing about this Nama milk maker is that you can make cashew nut milk, oat milk, almond milk,
spelt milk, quinoa milk.
Any type of milk which you want. Like, it's amazing. And you can customize them and be sure of the quality of the ingredients.
Does it take long to make?
No, 1 minute 30.
Okay, brilliant. They've new technology that helps called blend and strain, which is really, really cool, really easy to make, beautiful inbuilt display. Like all Nama things, it's very cool.
Yeah. And Nama, they're all about supporting you to eat more plants. They give a 15-year warranty on their milk maker.
How long?
15 year.
Wow.
So they really believe it. They really want you to use it and support it. It is built to last, so it is quality. You get 10% off with the code HappyPear10. So do check it out. It's amazing. Really, I was blown away this weekend.
What's it called?
The Nama M1 Milk Maker. 10% off with the code HappyPear10 at checkout.
And for anyone who listens to the podcast, also with our code HappyPear10, you'll be able to get 10% off all their incredible juicers too.
You know, what I like to relate it to actually is the circadian rhythm. And we all know what it's like to not have a good night's sleep, not to pay attention to our circadian rhythm. I mean, we don't go, oh God, it's such a bore, I've got to go to bed and sleep now. We know that sleep is so foundational to our well-being. So we know that how our energies change through the day, and all of us try to optimize our day by working with up the energy of the day. You know, some people come alive at night. I'm a lark, you know, I'm most creative in the morning. So we learn to capitalize and utilize those energies. And when we cooperate with cycles, it's like they take care of us. It keeps us, because you can't stay switched on all the time. It's a recipe for burnout. And so the menstrual cycle is no different. It is this activity at its foundational level of activity and rest, menstruation being the time of just really coming in and stilling and being more inner and slower. It's like the sleep time, if you like, and ovulatory time as that most alive, most energetic, physical energy and so on. And by cooperating with this rhythm and not forcing yourself to be permanently on all the time, you are really pacing your nervous system. It's keeping you in the rhythm of you rather than the artificial rhythm of world timing, which is not organic. It's just do, and push. And the menstrual cycle is this wonderful movement of push and then retreat, of a surge and then a slight dipping of energy. And when you cooperate with that, you're really taking care of your nervous system. You're really tuning into your unique constitution and needs. And that brings this lovely feeling of connection with yourself. And when you're physically nourished, you're emotionally nourished as well. So you'll feel more in tune, more in flow with who you are, your energies. It sort of builds natural self-confidence. It's amazing how many people say that to when they start practicing cycle awareness. They find it much, much easier to assert their boundaries, take care of their needs. And then the sort of final pièce de résistance in all this is that at menstruation, you're naturally slowed down in the latter part of the cycle. There will be a slight drop in energy. And as you come into menstruation, you'll feel this huge need probably to just pull away from the world and drop. And if we can do this, we open up this expanded consciousness. And it's so wild, this. And I have to say, because I'm post-menopause now, I do miss this aspect of menstruation, which is that you step into this really expanded states of consciousness, these feelings of bliss and love. It's like an oxytocin wash through your whole being. And this feeling of yes, you feel just the utter rightness of who you are. This just lovely kind of lineup. And in that connection with yourself, then it's just this well of creative ideas that then pour through you. Like, the meaning of your life, what you're about, what your creative things should be in the world. And because, in ignoring this, we are losing out on all this incredible spiritual nourishment, as well as physical nourishment that goes on. Because menstruation, when you stop, it's like this incredible de-stressing of your system. Because we all get stressed. I mean, life is demanding. But then each month at menstruation, a bit like when you go to bed at night, your whole system resets. And then you're off again with a new cycle, like the start of a new day after a good night's sleep. It's such a good feeling.
You describe it so beautifully. I'm kind of like, oh, I'd love to experience that.
I know a lot of men say that.
Oh, totally. You describe it really, really. I feel a yearning in me. You kind of, am I right in saying that you kind of discover this menstrual cycle awareness through your own experience when you used to have some serious menstrual pains?
Yes, I did. Now, in my 20s, I woke up to the negatives of the pill, because I went on it briefly, and then thought, no, I do not want a pharmaceutical drug controlling my body. And so I learned about fertility awareness. So I was already connected into knowing about the physical signs of my body for contraception purposes. And then the great announcement of this work happened just before my 31st birthday, when I got the menstrual pain from hell. And out of nowhere, it just ripped me open. It was insane. And this pain then came back month after month. And it would last for 2, 3, sometimes 4 days. And I was just not wanting to take drugs every month. I was already into natural therapies and good eating and so on at this point. And surgery and drugs were just not the solution for me. And I made this radical decision to believe in my body. I thought, my body is talking to me. I'm going to listen. And I just chose to give space to menstruation as much as I could. And it was an imperfect business because, of course, I had work and so on. But I was so fierce about not wanting to just take drugs and then soldier on. And anyway, the drugs barely hit the surface of it, it was so intense. So I started giving space to menstruation and really going cold turkey with the pain. I thought, fuck it, excuse my language.
No, it's great. Let it out. Great.
I thought, I'm just going to go in there. I'm just going to feel myself. I'm just going to face it. And it was just so radicalizing. It was like it pulled me right into the root of my being. It was like I could not avoid who I was, myself, nothing. And I had a very wonderful partner, a man who would hold me through the pain as I was screaming and cursing. I cursed the patriarchy, it was all the patriarchy's fault as far as I was concerned. I was cursing, and he would just rock and hold me. God, he was an angel. I'm forever grateful for that. Anyway, of course, I was practicing natural therapies as well. I had a good diet. I was getting massage, shiatsu, and so on, all sorts of things, which I write about in my first book. And but it was this radical act of giving space to menstruation, because what I was also doing was reducing stress. Instead of pushing through, I would drop my bundle. And this, over time, the pain receded, and it did take time. And occasionally I had to take drugs. And but gradually, the pain reduced. And I started then, because I'd given space to menstruation, I started experiencing menstruation as this very different state of being, this expanded consciousness. And really, it was like the pain took me by the scruff of the neck and pulled me into my sail and said, "You've got business here," And I listened and followed, and I followed my body. And really, of course, I was basically doing a prototype of menstrual cycle awareness, because I had to know when my bleed was due to organize my life around it. And my cycle was fortunately regular, that I could say. 28 days on the clock it was for me, exactly. I know. And so I could plan my life. And it's hard when you can't plan your life around your symptoms. But this act of reducing pressure, really honoring my body, then as I was paying attention then to the whole cycle, I got to see different flavors of myself and feel how my energies change through the month. And I always really loved the second half of the cycle, because when I came into the premenstrual phase, I used to feel much more gutsy and real, and like the rubber was hitting the road and you didn't want to stand in my path, whereas I always felt not quite so grounded in the first half of the cycle. So I got to sort of know my own nature and where my strengths lay and where my vulnerabilities lay. And honestly, it was like this waking up process that went on over the years, because, I'm 71 now, so this is like 40 years of counting here.
Wow, yeah.
And I started teaching the work to women who suffered. This was in Australia, because I lived in Australia for 25 years. And it was individual women's stories that would come to these workshops or into my therapy practice, because I was a practicing psychotherapist as well. And it was their individual stories that would suddenly illuminate things for me. They would just say something, reflect something, and I go, "Oh my God, that's it. That's what's happening." So it was like a jigsaw puzzle that I was piecing together. And then about 15 years ago, I was going through menopause. I moved back to the UK. I met Sjanie, and then the work has just exploded since then. So I was building something in Australia, but the ideas, the combination of the pair of us and our deep experience, deep commitment to the process, really, just took off from there.
It's lovely. It's really, really lovely to hear.
We think of ourselves as the happy pair 2.0.
I love it. Definitely. I love it.
Or maybe we should be the happy apples. I don't know.
No, I think we should be the happy apples. I think they've cornered the market.
Maybe. Well, one question was, it was so lovely to hear all that. It is really just about, like, there'll be lots of women listening here and they go, okay, menstrual cycle awareness. Like, how does this start? Because even me as a man who doesn't go through it, like, there's the ovulation phase, there's the bleed phase. And like, how I understand it is the ovulation phase happens about 7 days after, the menstrual phase. I could be completely wrong here now, but it's something like that. Could you even explain the phases, or for any woman listening, how it works? Because as you know, I think it would be very relevant and very practical.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we'll talk archetypal cycle, like textbook cycle, but in reality, everyone has a variation on this. So textbook cycle is a 28-day cycle, And day 1 is the first day of bleeding. So that's menstruation. And that lasts for, say, like 3 to 5 days. Following that, you move into pre-ovulation. And then around sort of day 11 or 12, you go into the ovulatory phase. You haven't yet ovulated. A couple of days later, around day 14, would be ovulation. So it's exactly halfway through the cycle, or 14 days before your next bleed. So then around day 18, 19, you move into the premenstruum phase, and then back to bleeding, and the cycle continues. So that's the sort of basic biological map. And for anyone who has a menstrual cycle, you will of course experience physiological changes. Obviously, the blood is a very obvious one, but then you also have changes that happen when you ovulate. Sometimes you feel the sensation of ovulation, or your cervical mucus changes. In the premenstrual phase, you might feel physically more tender. Some people experience breast tenderness and so on. So there are these physiological changes that happen during the menstrual month. And what Alexandra and I became really fascinated in, which kind of came out of her deep dive into her pain, as she so beautifully described, is the psychological and emotional changes that happen in sync with these 4 phases of the cycle. So we've created a number of maps to really illustrate what the inner changes that happens when we move through the menstrual month. And one of the main maps that we've created is called the inner seasons of the menstrual cycle. And this really overlays on these 4 biological phases. And it's how we liken our inner experience to what happens in the seasons of the year. So that phase of menstruation that I first spoke of, when you're bleeding, we talk about that as the inner winter. And that is probably conjuring up a sense of actually what it feels like to have that experience of bleeding. Very quietened, very inner. There's a sense of wanting to retreat and withdrawal. It's a very deeply internal process. Then the pre-ovulatory phase, we liken that to the inner spring. So you can there imagine this feeling of like renewal, new energy, new life, optimism. We often feel quite hope, risky. I always think of this is the phase where I feel really kind of alive and turned on and kind of excited by life. And then the ovulatory phase is the inner summer. And there you can totally picture this sense of eternal pleasure, long languid times, huge amounts of energy. You can be all things to all people, very generous. We often call this phase superwoman territory, because really this is where women can multitask. Like, you've got any women in your life, they can do all the things when they're in the inner summer. And then the inner autumn is the premenstruum. And so that's more of where the energy starts to wane, and there's this kind of shift in mood. There's something much more, just like autumn is very atmospheric, we start to feel more in this autumn phase. This is where our feeling life comes back online. We start to become more sensitive. There's something kind of deeper at work, more subtle going on. And we're making that move back to retreat at menstruation, much like the autumn leaves falling and the way nature starts to quietly close down. So, that's the physiological process, and that's how we've overlaid it with an understanding of what's happening in terms of our mood and energy.
It allows you to really feel it. Like you going through this, like, oh wow, that's really helps explain and almost like revel and appreciate the beauty of the female cycle,
But the challenge is that the outside world doesn't necessarily cater to
that's
this.
why it's called the internal.
The first thing I thought of there was, when you were going through it, was like, what about all these professional women athletes that have to perform at, like, say the Olympics was just on, and the first thing I thought of was these women that are like, they have natural cycles. Some of them are going to be in winter, some of them are going to be in summer, some are going to be in spring, and that's obviously going to influence their performance.
Yeah. That's one of many scenarios. Just think of mothers who also, children are relentless, especially young children. You don't get to have time where you can just switch off and tell them to go fend for themselves when they're like 2 years old. Yeah, so it's true. The outer world really doesn't conform. And this is what we're all living with. Alexandra, what were you going to say?
I was just really, I feel very strongly about this thing. And I feel very strongly about the potency of power of actually starting to do menstrual cycle awareness to become more effective in the world and not to see it as a limitation, but on the contrary, because you're connected to yourself, that is a power. Just being connected to yourself and knowing what your needs are and knowing your boundaries. So we talk about each phase, each of those seasons has these sort of amplified powers to them. And of course, Sjanie beautifully illustrates the powers of the inner summer, the ovulatory phase, where, truly you can do everything for everybody and et cetera, the superwoman. And then the autumn powers, the premenstrual powers, yes, we have more sensitivity then. And what's happening is we're becoming more connected to ourselves. So we're getting, if you're aware of this, if you're not aware of this, you'll just be reactive, which, then is sort of called PMS, and people roll their eyes and, it's that time of the month, that kind of crap that goes down. I can't stand it, the diminishment of this. But if you're connected to it and if it's respected, what's happening is you come into a much greater sort of clarity about yourself and precision about how you use your time and energy. And in fact, you can be incredibly effective and productive at this time in a way that is very different to the other phases of the cycle. So it's you can capitalize on the cycle to really serve your work. And you get really smart about how you deal with your diary. No one else has to know, where you are in your cycle. But if someone says, oh, let's have a meeting on blah, blah date, and you look at your diary and you go, that's day 1 of my bleed. No way am I doing that. And you go, no, sorry, terribly sorry, busy that day. No, let's do another day. It's so cool.
Let's wait till Superwoman Day and I'll take you on.
Yes, exactly. Or, just wait till day 19 or 20. You don't want to argue with me on that day. Honestly, it's so funny this, but it is precise as certain days of the cycle. It can be that precise sometimes for some people that they have something so distinctive happen.
Wow. I think it's brilliant. I think it's something that... my daughter is 14, and it's something that I must talk to my wife and talk to how we navigate this in a way that supports her in that way. I also really admire, it was yesterday when I was listening to doing some study in terms of your work on menopause. I was so excited. As I was saying before I started, I was at my daughter's football match, and there were a couple of ladies in the sideline, and whether they were or weren't, perimenopausal or menopausal, I just wanted to go, I listened to something incredible. You really should listen. These women are doing incredible work, because I've never, as you often say, menopause is often seen as something a problem that's to be medicated, or something that gets in the way, and it's something that, can be quite spoken derogatively, and even I'm slightly ashamed in that I know more about menopause than my mother and than my wife. And why aren't women supporting this? I wonder if you could talk about the process of menopause, because the medical field often sees it one way, and I really appreciate your reframing and your kind of paradigm shift.
Sjanie, I'd love you to set that up a bit, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I there was something you said right early on in our conversation about how the menstrual cycle is seen as this limit and a problem to overcome. And I think in a way, a whole lot of the distress that happens around menopause is because overall cycles and our menstrual cycle isn't valued. So many of us haven't been taught about cycle awareness, and so many of us have spent our lives fighting against this natural ebb and flow, a bit like working night shifts for many, many years, and really overriding that circadian rhythm. So many people have been overriding this rhythm of activity and rest in the menstrual cycle. So if you think of our life arc as women, our menstruality life arc, that starts at menarche, which is your first bleed, and kind of goes to menopause and beyond. That arc of our life, when we are menstruating and going through these inner cycles, we're going through this process of inner development, of maturation, of spiritual awakening. It happens actually naturally when you are paying attention to your menstrual cycle. So through this arc of your menstruality, your menstruating life, you're moving through these life seasons, you could say. So in your kind of teens and 20s, you're in the inner spring of your menstruating life, young, innocent, experimental, getting to know yourself. Then in your 30s, you're moving into the inner summer of your menstruating life, which is very much about establishing yourself in the world, doing the work, building your family, building the career, however you choose to use all that creative energy. Then in your 40s, you're moving into the autumn of your menstruating years. This is what people talk about as perimenopause. So everything that happens in the premenstruum of the cycle, you're experiencing a version of that in your 40s. The heightened sensitivity, stronger emotions, much more vulnerable to stress, and so on. And then, of course, you get to menopause, which is the cessation of your periods. And this is like the inner winter of your menstruating years. So when you see our developmental process in that arc, it's not hard to see how so many are fighting against that waning of energy, that really that life phase of retreat and slowing down and gear change that happens in your 40s, and then of course peaks at menopause in this inner winter time. So a lot of the distress that's happening, a lot of the symptoms, a lot of the feelings of despair and hopelessness are because people are not connected to this cyclical change, and they're on some level fighting it. That's not their fault at all. It's just because we haven't been tutored in cyclical living and in deeply trusting this. So yes, what we say is this very natural organic life process is actually a really crucial part of our developmental process, of our maturation. It's a rite of passage, much like our first bleed is this rite into our beginning of our adulthood. Menopause is a rite of passage into the beginning of our eldership. So we hold it in a very, very different light. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're turning up at the door of menopause, unprepared, where, as Sjanie described, we're not in touch, we're not pacing who we are. We're being paced by the culture that is, of course, just do, keep going, keep pushing through. And so we're overstressed and exhausted, and that is a deadly, deadly combination for our hormones. And because we are going through a massive hormonal shift, our whole being is being rewired now. And I love to use the analogy of the caterpillar, becoming the butterfly. It's just the perfect analogy, because what we're doing is we're closing down on one phase of our life to give birth to a whole new phase. Now, unfortunately, our culture has very negative thinking about older women as being somehow past it. And I use that word woman very deliberately. Older women are seen as, menopause is seen as the end of, creative, productive life. Well, I will let you in on a secret here. It is the freaking beginning of something. You are I was so unleashed by menopause completely. Menopause is the biggest liberation into who you are. But you've got to go through a process. Your body's got to go through a process, and that requires energy, actually, and you haven't got the energy, which is why we feel this need to retreat. So, like the caterpillar, you're going to feel the need to cocoon for a while, to draw away from the world. And you will feel this pulling in, and you will actually feel yourself a little bit separate from the world, like the world is going on out there, and there's a sort of screen between you and the world. I mean, you're in the world going about your business, but it's like there's a sort of bubble around you. It's so fascinating, this detachment that starts to happen. And this is what your psyche, what your soul deeply, deeply requires now. Because what menopause is trying to do is it's trying to really bring you home to your deep self, to really find out who you truly are again, to really reconnect deeply in. And so you're detaching from the world, and then there's this feeling of being undone that happens, like the caterpillar that goes to mush. And you're going to go to mush on the inside. I always have to preface this by saying, and normal life continues whilst you're going through your death and rebirth. You still have to put food on the table, for your children, go to work, and so on. I mean, it's insane. And on the inside, you're doing this extraordinary sort of inner psychological and deeply spiritual inquiry into yourself and who you. It's deep existential work, like, who am I? What am I really about? These questions become absolutely enormous now. And honestly, you will feel like everything you've done to date, you're just not interested in. Things that you were passionate about, this was it, for you. Suddenly it's not quite it. Or even your beloved children or your beloved partner. It's like, do you think you could all leave home now, please? I'm done, So you shouldn't take it personally, all the men out there, all the partners and people going through that. Don't take it personally. I mean, I'm aware that a lot of relationships do end at menopause, but that's because people aren't able to negotiate the changes. Because as the woman goes through menopause, she goes through this change, everyone else around her has to change because she is going to start withdrawing her services. And one of the conversations that really makes me laugh, it just happens spontaneously, it comes out of women, it says, things are going to be different now.
Dun, dun, dun.
Jeez, wow.
It's like, yeah, I am not going to be there for you like I used to be. I am withdrawing my services.
That's a great line. I'm withdrawing my services. Like, it's wow.
Because I've got other business to attend to now that's more important. And yes, I mean, I would so want this to be dignified. I really do, to feel it really respected, so that a woman or a person going through menopause can step away and feel something important going on in themselves. It isn't just about themselves, because we're stepping into something so much bigger post-menopause that's about serving the world. It's we're coming into our calling at the most profoundest level, which is always about serving something beyond us. So yes, we withdraw and we are undone, so to speak, psychologically. It's almost like we forget everything that we've done. I couldn't hold on to everything I'd done. I felt like I'd done nothing. I actually felt like, what have I done with my life? It was really classic stuff. And you become more and more vulnerable to yourself, and there's a lot of feelings that will come up, and a lot of rage, I have to say, a huge amount of rage.
Oof.
Yeah. It's extraordinary, and it's extraordinary. And you get to see all the ways you suppressed yourself and gave in. It's shocking. I mean, I was always a very fierce, outspoken person, but when I thought, oh my God, I thought, I've been conned. I can't remember thinking, I've been conned. I remember you see through things. You see through people. You see through institutions. Everyone. You're like the boy looking at the emperor going, he's got no bloody clothes on.
Wow.
You really, it's like that. It's so real. You suddenly see all these icons you had, on pedestals, and they all crumble. And you also are seeing yourself. So there is a real kind of facing of yourself. And this is a deeply challenging, a deeply vulnerable time. And I don't want to, this very serious stuff that goes on here. And sadly, suicidal ideation and actually people taking their own lives does increase at this time because it feels so bleak. And that is such a statement about our times, that women are not resourced enough, not supported enough to meet this. I just really want to acknowledge that, because there's some deep, deep challenge and stress out there around menopause because people aren't resourced, because women aren't resourced. But if we are resourced, we're able to have more space for ourselves, agenda-free, responsibility-free space to think and do nothing, to just do nothing. Do nothing, to rest, to potter around, to, not worry or not care for a while about things, and to just be nourished on all levels, just really caring for ourselves and really attending to our health. And a lot of unresolved trauma can come up here too, which needs to be tended to. So we talk about this phase as the repair phase, where you just take care of yourself. You do your inner work. You do whatever you need for self-care, for healing your body. And then, like the caterpillar, so this is the mush phase of the caterpillar, but then the cells of the butterfly start to spark within the mush. And you have this going on within your soul. You suddenly see these lights, these possibilities, these thoughts. Oh, wow. Like, it's extraordinary how something starts to form. And yes, like the cells of the butterfly, they increase and grow and start to take shape. And you start to feel yourself being put back together again, and you feel restored. It's so important that your energy is nourished, because if you're still exhausted, this process of renewal doesn't really happen in a very coherent, cogent way. But the more you're nourished and the more you're able to listen to yourself and respect yourself, and you will make radical changes. You will make radical changes in your life at this point.
And it's about 45 to kind of 52, that kind of window, like what you're talking about, because you described it as the kind of autumn phase, at the macro phase of a woman's cycle. That autumn is like the 40s, and then, winter is more the 40s. Winter is the kind of menopause, which is perimenopause, and menopause kind of 47 to 50. Or is it like a 10-year window, or is it like a 2-year window, what you're talking about? Or does that very case specific? Because
it's a very good question. We see the 40s as the autumns. There is not this menopause transition that I'm describing.
You're not in the caterpillar phase in the 40s.
No, you're not in the caterpillar phase. You are preparing for it. And actually what you do in your 40s is crucial for setting yourself up well for the caterpillar phase. But the caterpillar phase can start whilst you're still menstruating and continue after you stop menstruating. And it can be anything from a couple of years to 5 years. I think for myself, it was maybe 2 to 3 years. And it's for each woman, each person to nominate for themselves. And you will know there's something so uncompromising. It's like, I have to go now. Bye-bye. It is so intense, that feeling of needing to get away. We have a phrase, we call it the burn the house moment, where you want to just literally walk out. You don't want to take
services closed.
Throw the match over your head,
for business.
Walk off into the whole lot.
And get in your convertible and just drive off into the sunset.
Absolutely.
Screw the lot of yous. See us after.
It is so powerful. And we do have to urge caution around that moment, because we have to remind people that they need a house to come back to. And it's probably not a good idea to burn everything. They do still need relationships in their life, and you still probably need gainful employment, that kind of thing.
Yeah, wow.
It's amazing in that I've never heard menopause described like this, described as this rite of passage, described in it's an opportunity to kind of connect to your deeper self, to find, as you the title of your book, Wise Power, to step into your more authentic version of yourself.
Because it's usually just symptoms. It's usually you just hear about brain fog and hot flushes and lack of
libido,
losing concentration and losing self-confidence and lack of energy and can't sleep, and it's all symptoms. That's what you typically hear of, rather than this incredible opportunity what you've just described, which I'm sitting there like a man going, I want a bit of that. Like, what happens for us chumpy men? Like, does anything happen, or are we just like, we're just here to watch the show?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful that you two are here having this conversation with us exactly for that reason, because we're very glad that there is a conversation out there about how people are suffering with symptoms, because many people do. But in a way, that conversation has taken over. And actually, this new story of menopause that we're speaking to is actually the deeper understanding that's missing in our culture, that if it were restored, it's like we would all kind of feel much more okay about what's happening. And that immediately reduces stress, and that immediately creates a different relationship to what's happening. And we believe that many of the symptoms would fall away if people understood what was going on and could care for themselves in the way that they really truly needed to. Yeah, it would be radical.
It's a bit like when people were waiting for a taxi. If they knew that the taxi was coming in 10 minutes, they were suddenly at ease. Like this, like with Uber, suddenly when you had the opportunity to know my taxi is coming in 14 minutes, suddenly you're like, oh, grand, it's coming, I know. And you might be pissed off that it's a little bit later. And I think similarly, that context, if you do realize that menopause is this opportunity to connect with a much more truer, authentic version of yourself, suddenly it's like, bring it on.
And it will pass. It will.
Yeah,
it will pass
exactly. Exactly. And what Alexandra described there is a very strong, inner experience that you go through. And if you don't have anyone saying to you, this is meant to happen, this is okay, you can be going through that experience. And as many people do, think, what's wrong with me? I'm losing it. I'm going crazy. I can't cope anymore.
Oh, it's seen like a design flaw. It's like often seen, and as you, I'm kind of quoting the way what you talk about, is that it's often seen as a design flaw to be medicated.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you don't know that what's happening is actually supposed to happen, it's very hard to feel the dignity.
So at the start, we talked about the pill. Like, a lot of women go on the pill to kind of minimize pain or whatever, or for contraception. On the other side, during menopause, you hear HRT is something which is, a lot of women lean into that because it can help them still be efficient and still kind of pump on through. What are your thoughts on that in the context of what you've just described?
Yes, that's a big question. And
I'm sure it's not a black or white one. Sorry.
No, it's not at all. And I mean, I'm personally not a fan of HRT because I'm not a fan of taking drugs. You heard me talking about when I had the pain, and I want to be able to avoid those things as much as possible. But I'm very grateful for the fact that all these options are available to us when we are in extremis, when we're in extreme situation. So I give thanks for the fact that they are available, but they are being handed out, I feel, like as the sort of frontline, sort of first stop kind of response, rather than really looking at the issue holistically, and which is, of course, we want to restore this new story, or to restore consciousness of the whole menstrual cycle journey, and how when you're practicing cycle awareness, you are grown into menopause. And menopause was a very organic next step for me. And although I experienced everything that we write about in the book, it felt dignified. It felt I met it. It felt, it didn't feel like something slamming into me. I sort of evolved through it. And And I had very good self-care practices because I had actually suffered with bad health problems a lot of my life. So I had become fierce about my self-care. And so I didn't get a lot of physical symptoms. In fact, I only experienced a hot flush at the end when I moved countries back to the UK and my body was exhausted. And it was to do with my adrenals, because if my adrenals are empty, then, I can get temperature fluctuations. Um, so it's important that we're prepared, and very few are. And so they're slamming into menopause. And if you're slamming into it, it's hideous. And you've still got to go to work. You've still got to, do this and that. And I totally get it when people reaching for HRT, but not everyone benefits from it. I mean, it's important to realize that, and it's not.
I think it's, yeah, just to jump in, Alexandra, I think it's makes sense as an emergency for people who are in deep distress and suffering, but as a way to fight the organic change, as a way of overriding actually what's wanting to happen in your body, which is that you're wanting to slow down, you're wanting to withdraw your services, you're wanting to rest and step back and retreat. Taking our HRT and overriding that really kind of overrides this built-in system of sustainability in our body. It's not really allowing us to go through that ebb, so that, as Alexandra was beautifully describing, so we can have this amazing rebirth and regeneration for this second part of life where our services will come back. So for everyone who's concerned that all the women are withdrawing their services, it's not forever, it's temporary. Services do come back, and they come back with huge power and amplification and with enormous effect.
And
So
different
it's worth
services.
little hiatus.
I'd imagine they're different services as well. It's not, it is a rebirth.
I think an important question to ask is, are there any tools then for someone who's approaching menopause, like that they can kind of almost be aware of, that they can bring into this incredible transformation process? Like, are there things that someone should try to cultivate?
Yeah, you mentioned self-care practices and leaning into that during the autumn and winter phases.
Yeah. I love this idea of getting fit for menopause, which does mean getting physically fit, because anything you do to create good health, have good diet, build muscle, get physically fit, is going to really sustain you during menopause. But when we say get fit for menopause, we're also talking about getting psychologically and emotionally fit. So that is the 40s, the autumn of your menstruating years. It's so important that you're practicing cycle awareness. So if you're someone who's just hearing about this for the first time, come and find out how to practice cycle awareness. Actually, our book, Wild Power, we describe the practice in a lot of detail, and start practicing cycle awareness and start honoring this ebb and flow in your energy, because it's going to teach you how to let go when it comes to menopause. It's going to teach you how to slow down, how to surrender, how to trust this withdrawal that happens. Because every menstrual month, in the premenstruum and at menstruation, you're going through this process of dying in a way. Everything Alexandra described that happens at menopause happens in a little mini way around menstruation. So you're going to be learning this layer of self-care, which we call cyclical self-care. It isn't just any old self-care. It's self-care that really honors where you're at in your cycle. And one of the simplest versions of the cyclical self-care is just to rest at menstruation, which I say just rest at menstruation. But oh my goodness, does that take some discipline, some mindfulness, some choice, some learning to ask other people to support you, getting really canny about your day, your life, how you parent, what you're doing at work, and so on. But that alone, that kind of self-care, resting at menstruation, is going to set you up so well for the kind of gear change that's needed at menopause and the sort of level of rest that you need at menopause.
Such great
So,
advice.
yes.
Because it seems like one of the overarching principles that you're talking about is that understanding and really connecting to your body's natural rhythm and cycle. So it's like a spiritual process of absolutely being present to what is happening within your body at any given period of a menstrual cycle or a life.
And it seems like the
Cycle.
micro, you've got the 28-day cycle, but then that's reflected in the kind of 10-year chunks, that the full menstruation journey from menarche to menopause seems to be
exactly.
reflected from 28 to 4 decades, really, probably.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah, huge.
I
And-
love
and
your work.
that's why you started the Red School, and you've written 2 incredible books,
Redschool.net.
like Wise Power, and then the other one is Wild Power. I love
Yeah,
these 2.
yeah. Like immediately, I'm here thinking, geez, I must get my wife and my daughter and my.
I must read these.
all these.
Every
I
little
must.
bit.
It's really inspiring.
Yeah. Thank you. And we really want men to read these books. I mean, they're written for women, but this is like, if a man ever wants to understand a woman, this is the book to read. So it will make sense of so much of what's going on in your relationship. I mean, whether it's with your wife or your daughter. I mean, it's gives such insight into the psyche of women, because we are cyclical, and suddenly you'll be able to see that so distinctly and so clearly, and know how to kind of ebb and flow with the women in your life. So we hope you do read it. We hope all the men listening read it.
Well, it's amazing you're talking about the women being cyclical, and then it makes us just men sitting here like plebs, just going, we're just the same all the time. Like, are we just monkeys? Like, that kind of way. Like, are we lesser creatures because we don't cycle? Obviously we're not. We're just different. We're just different creatures. But
you are totally
yeah.
magnificent.
We love
thanks for
men.
build.
We
Thanks for
love
thanks
that
for
you
just
are
massaging our
you.
ego slightly. We
And
just needed a little
we
pick
love
me
the
up.
fact that you are not us.
We so need your stability. The fact that art cyclical, and it's such, isn't nature so incredible in its design? I mean, it's perfect, really.
Really works together.
Yeah,
It all works
amazing.
out.
It's almost like modern society doesn't really support the female.
It's not almost. It's fundamentally it
yeah,
doesn't.
sorry.
It's designed by men. That's why it's like. That's why they were.
Yeah.
Talking about the patriarch. Alexandra was there.
Want to
Sjanie
rip it
was.
down. It's all that fault.
Well,
yeah.
it's just not set up to facilitate. But anyway, we got to land this ship. So you're amazing. We absolutely admire your work massively. We'd love to blow wind in your sails however we can. Your books are amazing. Wild Power and Wise Power. And redschool.net has lots of courses. And then you're on Instagram, red.school.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can
at
find them on
red.school.
At red.school.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're brilliant. Thank you so much for this. It's been a real
And thank you
treat.
for your work. It's so needed.
Yeah, glorious.
Thank you. We really appreciate you too. Thank you so much.